So, nearly 1,000 pages of sealed legal documents connected to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell have just been unsealed. And inside, you've got sworn testimony, police reports, private emails, the whole shebang. The big question is, what do they actually tell us? Well, to figure that out, we're going to pull on a single thread that runs through all 900 of these pages, a very clear pattern of calculated silence.
To really get to the heart of what's in these documents, you have to start right here with this quote. This is Ghislaine Maxwell under oath in a 2016 deposition. She's asked a question, and this is her answer. It's like a wall just goes up, right in the middle of a formal legal proceeding.
And that immediately makes you wonder, right? Why would she refuse to answer? What on earth was she being asked that was so sensitive her lawyer had to just shut it all down? That question is the thread we're going to follow all the way through this.
Okay, so first things first. It's really important to get that these documents aren't just random scribbles. They're mostly from a civil lawsuit that was filed against Maxwell. And the core of it, the real meat, is sworn testimony given during a very high-stakes legal battle.
And to get a sense of those stakes, you have to know what a deposition is. This isn't just some casual chat, you know? It's formal testimony given under oath. It's just as legally binding as if you were in a courtroom. If you lie, there are serious consequences. And this is the setting where Ghislaine Maxwell is refusing to talk. So why were the lawyers asking these super specific and honestly often really graphic questions? Well, they were trying to establish what's called a modus operandi, or an MO, a signature pattern of behavior. The whole point was to show that these weren't just one-off incidents, but part of a systematic, repeatable operation.
And when you actually dig into Maxwell's testimony, that pattern becomes impossible to ignore. A total wall of silence just appears around any question that touches on her personal life, especially if it involved Jeffrey Epstein.
And this right here, this was the legal shield they used again and again and again. Her lawyer would jump in and say that any consensual adult interaction was private, not relevant to the case, and that became the justification for building that wall of silence around dozens of really critical questions.
So what kinds of questions were they blocking? I mean, the list itself is pretty revealing. Was she asked about sexual contact with accuser Johanna Sjoberg? Instructed not to answer. Her relationship with Doug Band, a close aide to former President Bill Clinton? Same thing. Were masseuses forced to do things they didn't consent to? Did Epstein have very specific sexual requests? On every single one, silence.
But beyond just refusing to answer, Maxwell had another tactic. She'd just claim she couldn't remember. I mean, when she was asked about flying on Epstein's private planes with accuser Virginia Giuffre, something flight logs show happened more than 20 times while Giuffre was a minor, Maxwell's response was that she couldn't recall even a single one of those flights.
But here's the thing. Maxwell's evasiveness is only one side of the story. Because while she claimed to remember absolutely nothing, the testimony from other people in these documents is filled with incredibly specific, vivid, and pretty damning detail. They paint a picture not of silence, but of active recruitment.
And you can't see this clash of stories any clearer than with Johanna Sjoberg. In her testimony, Maxwell basically dismisses her, saying Sjoberg just came to answer telephones. But Sjoberg testified under oath that no, Maxwell personally came up to her on her college campus to offer her a job. And while Maxwell had no memory of telling Sjoberg to rub Epstein's feet, Sjoberg remembered the exact offer, $300 an hour.
And Sjoberg's testimony gets even more specific and disturbing. She remembers Maxwell calling her, angry, after a massage session with Epstein. In her deposition, Sjoberg says Maxwell told her she didn't finish the job, and that she, Maxwell, had to finish it for you. When the lawyers asked her what finishing the job meant, Sjoberg was clear. It meant bringing Epstein to orgasm.
This testimony also puts some very well-known people directly into these scenes. Sjoberg testified that she met Prince Andrew at Epstein's mansion in New York. And she described this really bizarre moment where Maxwell brought out a puppet that was basically a caricature of the prince and made them all pose for a photo with it.
And it's important to remember, this wasn't just one person's word against another's. The documents actually give us this critical third layer of evidence. You've got corroborating testimony from household staff, and you've got physical evidence from police investigations. A staff member named Alfredo Rodriguez testified that after he was fired, he got a threatening phone call from Maxwell. He claimed she warned him, "Don't open your mouth," and reminded him,
This is very powerful people, and one phone call and you finish. He said he felt intimidated and was genuinely afraid for his safety.
And then you have the physical evidence. When the Palm Beach police searched Epstein's home back in 2005, the list of what they took tells its own story. The inventory includes 2 massage tables, partially nude photos of women, penis-shaped soap, and at least 1 adult sex toy.
So what about Maxwell's connection to all of this? How close was she, really? Well, the documents have flight logs for Epstein's private planes. Maxwell's initials, GM, show up on those logs over 300 times. That really cements her as a constant central figure in Epstein's world.
The evidence in these documents gives us a pretty stunning look into the past, but their release isn't the end of the story. Actually, it's fueling a very real, very current push to bring even more information out into the open.
A bipartisan group of lawmakers, so from both sides of the aisle, has introduced a bill called the Epstein Files Transparency Act. This is a big deal. It shows that the demand for answers is crossing party lines and that the highest levels of government are now getting involved in this push for full disclosure.
So what would this act actually do? Well, it would force the Department of Justice to release a mountain of information. It's demanding all unclassified records on Epstein and Maxwell. It wants all the remaining flight logs and victim statements published. And this is a big one. It would publish the names of anyone who refused to cooperate with investigators, and it would unseal the internal government memos explaining why charges were or were not filed against people.
Which really brings us to the final, lingering question. These documents, they've opened a window into a really dark and complex world. But they also make it crystal clear that there's more information still sealed away. So the central question now is, what else is still out there, and will we ever get the full story?